Bonjour, welcome to Pâtisserie Le Marais. Today we are going to see the demonstration of my version of the honey caramel apple tarte tatin. We are going to see the process from the beginning to the end, starting with the dough, cooking the apples, cooking the caramel, and putting all together. My name is Barda. Let's get started. To use as a base for the apple tarte tatin, I'm going to use a sable breton. The sable breton means in French sandy texture, and breton because it comes from Brittany. This sweet pastry is very, very rich. It's very buttery. That's all we love in France, butter and sugar. This sweet pastry is really crumbly and really short. I want to show you how I'm making it right now. The ingredients for the sable breton are very, very simple. You can find that in your supermarket really easily. You only need 6 yolks, 200 grams of caster sugar, 200 grams of unsalted butter, and 350 grams of flour. You can use baker's flour, plain flour, it makes no difference as long as you don't knead the dough for too long. Here you will need also 15 grams of baking powder and 1 or 2 pinches of salt, just to add a little bit of taste. The process of making the sable breton takes around 5 minutes. To start, we are going to put the butter in the mixing bowl. Very important that the butter should not be hard. It shouldn't be melted either, but it should be like soft texture, something that you can push through your fingers. I'm going to put this in the bowl, just like this. And I'm going to cream this butter with the 200 grams of caster sugar. You can put the whole sugar together. After the eggs and sugar, we are going to add your 6 egg yolks. It is important that sometimes you need to push all the ingredients back to the bottom of the bowl, otherwise nothing is going to mix properly. The next ingredients is going to be the flour, the baking powder, and the pinch of salt together. But be careful, this needs to go in the bowl very, very gently, as it would probably just go everywhere and fly everywhere in your kitchen. And this is it. You have here my sable breton that we are going to finish kneading by hand for a minute. Now that everything is mixed properly, I'm going to tilt everything on the bench and finish mixing this dough and knead this dough a little bit by hand, but that shouldn't take more than 30 seconds. Don't be scared to put your hands on the dough. It's going to be a little bit sticky, but you need to combine all these ingredients very, very well together so you can have like a nice and smooth texture. And after a few seconds, you can see that everything is combined properly, and this is the beginning of your tarte tatin de sable breton. The next step, it's going to be rolling this beautiful sable breton in between 2 sheets of silicone paper. This is, remember, going to be the base for your tarte tatin. So that needs to be flat, even, and of course not too thick, but not too thin either. You want to get around between 1 and 1.5 centimeters thick. The next step, I'm going to cut this sable breton the size of my tin. Basically, the base of my tin is 220 millimeters, and this is how I'm going to prepare the base for the next step. Of course, I am using a cake ring. If you do not have a cake ring, you can use the tin you're going to bake your tarte tatin in. That should be normally the same diameter. We are now going to let rest and cool down the sable breton in the fridge for around 20 minutes. The next step is going to be preparing the tin for our tarte tatin. You will need your tin and you will need silicone paper that you will cut like in a long strips like this, and of course 1 round of silicone paper that you can cut just the size of the bottom of your tin. But first of all, you need to grease the bottom of your tin. Everything needs to be sticking to the side of the tin. If you do not grease, the paper might fall off, the caramel will leak on the side, and you are not going to really enjoy the rest of the cooking. So don't hesitate to grease the bottom of the tin. This is what's going to look like. There shouldn't be one spot dry. Once that is done, you can take your strip of silicone paper and you're going to put it all around the tin, and make sure that this goes all the way down to the bottom. Okay, there shouldn't be a gap between the bottom and the start of the silicone paper. I'm missing a little corner here, so I'm going to add a little bit more grease, and I've cut another piece of silicone paper earlier, so that is going to close the gap. And next, the base for your tarte tatin. This is going to go at the very bottom. Once you put the silicone paper at the bottom, push it down a bit and make sure everything is sealed. So at the end, this should look like this. We are now going to set aside the tin until we finish cooking the sugar. The next step is going to be preparing our apples. Before baking or cooking our apples, we are going to have to peel them, but peel them in a certain way. We are going to take our apple and we are going to first peel it, but when you peel it, you don't want to take too much of the apple. So in order to do so, just get yourself like a nice peeler, something that is easy to handle. So at the end, what you should be left with is a very nice apple, peeled perfectly, still roundish. And of course, once you peeled it, take the top off and the bottom off. Now you're only left with the apple only, nice and clean. The next step is you're going to slice your apple in half, and you need to core your apple. This is called coring your apple. You're removing the core with your peeler. You see, this is the best tool to actually peel and core your apple. And you do that with the other half. And this is what you are left with. So you're going to need 7 of those, 7 apples approximately, depending on the size of your tin at the end. If you choose a smaller tin than mine, then by all means just use only 6 or 5. And if you use a bigger one, you might use 7, 8, 9, up to 10, whatever the size it's going to be. So this is now down on my bench. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 apples. They are all clean and cored. The next step, I'm going to slice them in half. And the next step is going to be very important because we are going to shape them in order to fit all those apples in the tin later on. What do I mean by shaping? You're going to take 1/4 of an apple and you're going to cut just a little bit of the inside. So you end up with something that is relatively flat. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat, but it shouldn't have this little hole in the middle. Each all you're going to have in your tin is going to be a very big gap in your tarte tatin. All our apples that we core them and that we even them up, we are going to now cook them. We are going to cook them in what? In butter, of course, butter. For cooking my apples, I will need 200 grams of unsalted butter. Get ready a big pan and throw in your butter. Let this butter melt, and once the butter is completely melted, throw in your apples in it. It is very important to not let your butter burn in. As soon as it's completely melted, reduce a little bit the fire under the stove, and you can add gently all your apples. Everything should fit, and if it doesn't fit and you've got some apples on the top of each other, you will also notice that as you're cooking your apples, they will reduce a little bit. The size will become a little bit smaller because the juice is coming out. After approximately 10 minutes, your apples should have sort of a golden color, like this. Some of them will go a little bit more brown on the side, but that's not a problem. The main thing is that your apples are cooked and they still have the same shape than the beginning. We are now going to set aside those apples and let them cool down. We are going to handle them later on once they are cool. It's much easier to handle the apples when they are cool than when they are hot. For the next step, we are going to make a caramel made with 300 grams of caster sugar, 100 grams of honey, 100 grams of butter, because we like adding butter in everything we do in France, 1 pinch or 2 pinches of cinnamon ground, and 1 or 2 star anise pods. And throw in gently some sugar. Keep on adding more sugar as you go. Do not put all the sugar at the same time because it will create big lumps that you won't be able to get rid of. But if you add it gently, that just allows for the upper layer to melt gently and the caramel to start getting more and more color. Do not let your caramel burn. Every time it gets a little bit smoky, add a bit more sugar and mix the sugar around. I think you can really tell right now that your caramel is getting ready very, very quickly. So you have to add another bit of sugar, and maybe you can add the rest of the sugar very, very quickly after that. At that stage, you can already start throwing a little bit of cinnamon, just a little tiny bit of cinnamon, 1, 2 pinches. And shortly after, 1 and 2 pods of star anise. Star anise is really going to give a nice flavor to your caramel as well as the cinnamon. this is the caramel that you want to have. That's the color that you want. You don't want something too light, you don't want something too dark. Remember that if you burn your caramel, it will taste very, very bitter. Then, the next step is, of course, adding in your butter. Once the butter added, mix it through, but very gently, as it could just splash all around and you could hurt yourself. And keep on stirring until everything is dissolved. Once it's dissolved, give a little time to your caramel to melt every little bit of sugar that was not melted before. Let's not forget our honey. 100 grams of honey go straight into the pot once the caramel is done. And again, keep stirring until everything is mixed well together. You're going to see that slowly your caramel is going to be less bubbly and also less watery. And the mix of the honey, cinnamon, star anise caramel smells incredible in the kitchen. Your caramel is now ready. Once the caramel is ready, just pour everything in the tin you prepared earlier. But do not forget to remove the star anise pods that you put in earlier. We are now going to set aside the caramel for about 20 minutes on the bench. We need the caramel to set slightly. You do not want to put your apples when the caramel is hot. First of all, because you could hurt yourself, and also you don't want your apples to sink too quickly in the caramel. So once it's set, they are just going to sit on the top of it, and slowly in the oven, everything will sink and absorb all the juice of your caramel. After around 20 minutes, your caramel will have set, and this is how it should feel. This is a hard caramel set at the bottom of the tin. Next, we are going to place our previously cooked apples in the tin. The trick is that once you are looking this way, you need to lift up a little bit your apples and fit another one in between, and do that again and again. You do not want to have too much gaps in between all your apples. The way you are placing your apples will be later on, after baking, the way your tarte tatin is going to look. So try to get like a nice pattern now how you place your apples, because this will be the look of the end product. How does that look? I think it looks really close to one finished apple tarte tatin. And this is now ready to go in the oven for about 15 minutes at 190 degrees. This is how it looks like after 30 minutes baking in my oven. But depending on what oven you're using, you might need to let the tarte tatin a bit longer, 35 minutes, 40 minutes, or maybe a bit less, 25 minutes. The most important is feeling your apples, checking if they are not too hard. You see, they should feel a little bit softish, just enough to show you that they are cooked. Remember, they are going to go back in the oven very soon with the sweet pastry on top. It is now time to put your sable breton on the top of your apples. It is now time to put the Tarte Tatin back in the oven for around 40 minutes at 170 degrees. After 40 minutes baking in the oven, we are now going to remove the Tarte Tatin and we are going to show you how it looks like. After removing the Tarte Tatin, we need to let it set for about 30 minutes outside or in the cool room for 15 minutes in order for the tart to set a little bit so you can unmold it comfortably. It is now time to see the final result of our apple Tarte Tatin today. I'm going to unmold it in front of you. And here it is, the result that we were all expecting from the beginning. This is my version of the honey caramel apple Tarte Tatin. It's now on my plate. It smells amazing. It looks beautiful. The apples look like brown and sugary and so soft. I'm just going to dig in. That's the best Tarte Tatin I've ever tried. Honey and caramel Tarte Tatin. Enjoy.